way, I would like to introduce our panelists for today's event. Christoph Herzig, Head of Product Management of Supply Chain Solutions at Here Technologies, and Dr. Manish Goval, Global Segment Lead of Supply Chain at AWS. Take it away, Christoph.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nick, for the kind invitation to this webinar. Excited to present today. I'm working out of Germany, Berlin, globally responsible for product management function as it relates to supply chain solutions, which I will introduce in the beginning of the webinar with supported by a couple of slides. But I've been with Here Technologies for the better part of 4 years now, and have been from day one helping to create our business unit for the supply chain and fleet applications.
Great, thanks, Christoph. And Dr. Goval?
Hi, thanks, Nick, for inviting. This is Manish Goval. I'm based in Dallas. Out of AWS, I actually drive our offerings with solution providers like Here to help solve the supply chain challenges that our customers are facing today. Been in the industry for 25 plus years. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Great. We're very much looking forward to a robust discussion today regarding both Here Technologies and AWS's solutions for building a robust supply chain and for how we can optimize transport planning. I'd like to transition it over to Christoph to talk a little bit about what Here Technologies has to offer in this space. Christoph, please.
Yeah, so I think today we're going to talk about some of the trends and challenges in supply chain and how we're actually going to solve them with location technology. We're doing the webinar today together with AWS because we've just recently announced a multi-year collaboration with AWS to work together to build solutions for supply chain and logistics segments across the globe, and bring the power basically of location services to with the leading compute and IT services to accelerate our speed to market, and also support some of AWS's very large customers with our capabilities. And if you go to the next slide, then I will take it from here to introduce a bit about Here. So I can actually say that Here is probably one of the best kept secrets of the industry. When you actually look at some of the largest platforms in the world for B2B, then Here clearly represents that for the topic of location. Right, we have been doing this for the better part of 35 years now, supporting automotives with the very first sat-nav systems, and since then delivering more and more accurate and fresh digital maps for not only the automotive use case of enabling navigation in car, but also supporting many of the industry leaders in transportation and logistics. So if you go to the next slide, we have been chosen by many of the leading players because we're the #1 location platform providing enterprise grade quality on a global basis. We are present in more than 200 countries with our maps, and provide not only mapping but also dynamic content like real-time traffic and additional events that are location-based. What is also very, very important to understand about the location platform of Here is that it's built with privacy by design. And that basically means with Here Technologies, there's no secondary business model behind the location aspect. With other location platforms, I'm not going to mention them now, you basically get a lot of location services for free, navigation and guidance, and also access to data and APIs and web services. However, in the end, the location platform has a secondary business model, which we all know is, for example, advertising and hyperlocal advertising. For Here Technologies, the business model is location, and continuously improve location services, map quality, as well as more advanced real-time services, which I will talk about, and continuously improve the experiences around that. So with that in mind, a lot of the leading players have already chosen either here content or the here web services and APIs to build solutions on their own, or integrate these capabilities into their, for example, transport management systems or control towers. If you go to the next slide, I just want to highlight again, what you actually get when you partner with here. And I'm going to start on the left and actually at the bottom number. This is quite an impressive number. So actually, we are processing 15 billion probe data points on a daily basis. These probe data points are coming from, for example, vehicles that have a connected sat-nav system. It comes from smartphones and mobile phones that employ applications that are powered by here. And we're using additional data sources to make sense of the world and of location from these probe data points, which basically typically represent a movement on road or by pedestrians. And we also understand in many cases what kind of vehicle is being driven. And from this, we are actually producing maps with advanced attributes. For example, truck restrictions, time-based access restrictions for certain roads, bridge heights, physical limitations and others, hazmat restrictions, and all of that is made available on a map with more than 900 attributes. A standard map that you would employ to do a standard car routing probably uses about 20 attributes to get everything, including some speed limit information. With here maps, we're offering 900, around 800 to 900 attributes per road segment of 50 meters or 50 yards long. And with that, we're building, continuously improving the map quality. Now, the next number is actually 21 million vehicles are providing real-time sensor and probe data. And these sensors are actually LiDAR sensors, which more and more high-end vehicles in the Western world are equipped with. And we're actually using these LiDAR pixel clouds to create centimeter accurate maps that are used again to enable autonomous driving. For example, the recent launch of the Mercedes S-Class in Germany, where authorities have granted level 3 autonomous driving capabilities on German highways, is powered by here maps. So the many premium car manufacturers that enable automated driving believe in the combination of a high definition map, which is self-healing and continuously updated from the sensor data of the vehicles. And on top of that, employing the computer vision and the radar and LiDAR sensors in combination to actually enable a pleasant self-driving experience. So when you take the first and the second number and now come to the final point where we're expanding these capabilities of managing, processing massive amounts of data, sensor data, we are expanding now into the transport logistics space and connect also to telematics systems of trucks. And we are building out more and more data sources. When you look at the left side, not only from IoT trackers, which might be attached to containers, but also airline information, rail data, vessel information, and carriers from road transportation. And we allow customers and partners to bring their own data to the platform. So, and if you do that, we're actually normalizing everything on the level of location. You also have to take into account that actually a GPS ping is not a super accurate thing, right? So satellite navigation provides you with an accuracy of maybe 50 meters or yards. But in order to make sense of multiple GPS pings in a row, you have to do what we call the road matching. And that's exactly what we're doing. So for every GPS ping, we are providing an enriched version of that, tying it back to the most probable road taken. And combining now this sensor data with the mapping data and the traffic flow information, we are able to building out not only routing-based estimated times of arrivals, but we can actually mesh it together with additional event data and provide much more prediction. And this is actually exactly the vision that HERE has when it embarked also on the partnership with AWS to build out these kind of capabilities and make that available in a very scalable fashion to all transportation and logistics partners in the world. If you skip to the next slide, I just want to highlight that the way we basically see the use cases come together from a transportation and logistics is really always around the cycle of starting with planning, going to execution, then providing the analytics, and go back to continuously improve the cycle, right? And when you look at the planning phase, of course, you can only make that work by a deeper transport management system and EDI integrations, providing our routing and tour planning on top of that. Now partners can provide supply and demand matching, and suddenly you have the capability to build a much higher level of capacity and load optimization, which ultimately will improve your running costs, but also help with reducing your carbon footprint when you look at it from a per shipment basis, right? On the execution side, obviously, navigation and guidance is our core business. But the key here is that we also connect to as many trucks, as many shipments and containers and trailers as possible, and start bringing this data together, which then can be used for real-time decision making, rerouting, as well as looking for alternative strategies to resolve a roadblock. And then ultimately feeding, of course, all that into the analytics layer, where then you can actually start understanding dwell times, transit times at hubs, as well as looking at performance of different transport lanes and looking for continuous optimization of your networks. If you click to the next slide, I just want to kind of provide the vision of HERE when it comes to connected supply chains, right? So we want to make sure that everybody in the supply chain across multiple partners have all the shipments visible in real time. We provide lowest commercial and technical barrier for entry to these kind of capabilities in an open system, but remain and retain full data ownership and security. So if you're, for example, a retailer and you want to make sure that your data is a competitive differentiator over other market players, then you still have access to the data, and we provide you with the full ownership of that and make sure that you only share what you want to share when you want to share it. Very important is to build everything on extremely high quality data. So the HERE maps are curated for many, many years, and we have high standard of quality processes in place. And that is the same level of quality we apply to the data processing when it comes to logistics data. In order to make all that work, we need to break down the silos across the multiple stakeholders. So be it in your own supply chain, be it with your transportation partners, be it with your shippers, or if you're a shipper yourself, understand and make that happen from the freight forwarders to the carriers to the end consignee of the transportation. And what becomes, I think, a hygiene factor, but still is not entirely solved, is the sustainability aspect of the transportation management. Reducing carbon emissions starts with understanding where you stand today, and then starting to make set yourself targets, monitor, and continuously improve. But you need to have that available, this kind of level of data visibility on every step in the supply chain. And in order to make that happen, quickly go to the next slide, and this is also the last one I want to close this quick introduction with, is basically our approach towards customer and partner engagement. We are strongly believing in a collaborative value roadmap in order to actually take your transportation management to the next level. And in the end, everything starts with understanding your current networks, your current data, bring real-time information on top of historic data, and start building out this highly enriched data lake where location data and logistics data is coming together. Based on this, we can actually move from the pure point on a map, which shows you where transportation sits at this point, to actually a dynamic ETA calculation, routing based, as well as combined with additional events, to something that is more predictive and ultimately prescriptive. And all of that becomes the foundation for a fully automated supply chain. If you want to automate your supply chain, you need to have programmable pieces in every step of the process. And this is the key, where you need to start building out, for example, architectures, system architectures, which are loosely coupled by microservices, in order to continuously update your network and be able to reprogram it as it evolves, not only over, let's say, a quarter or a month, but in the end, even at every minute and in real time, to continuously stay on top of your transportation network. And with this, I think I would like to close the quick introduction of HERE and how we are approaching location-based problems in supply chain and logistics, and hand it back to you, Nick, for leading the upcoming conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Christoph. Thank you for that background information regarding HERE Technologies offerings. Manish, I think this would be a good opportunity to ask you, what are the challenges that you're seeing with shippers, retailers, and logistic providers, particularly around surrounding fulfillment today?
So there are three key drivers, right, when it comes to challenges that companies are facing from a fulfillment perspective. The first one really is around the customer expectations. Customers expecting newer modes of fulfillment, including like faster delivery, whether it's a same-day delivery or next-day delivery. And along with that, what they also expect is they want visibility in real time, right? This is what Christoph talked about, that where is my shipment at any given point of time? And that includes both consumers as well as businesses, right? I think consumers basically in their everyday life, really, or the experience that they are getting actually carries over when basically the same thing is happening on the business side as well, right? And not just getting visibility into where things are, but they want to be communicated to, right? Whenever there are any changes, they want those basically changes to be known as soon as possible rather than being surprised, right? So that is really a big driver of the challenges that follow, because what happens is, to meet those expectations, right, organizations have to operate at a very high level of speed in decision making and communication, right? And for this, we may have to redesign our processes, our organization, and the systems to support this fast communication and decision making. The third area, which is related, is, as we have seen over the last couple of years, right, there's been one set of disruption after another, right? Whether it's the pandemic, it's port congestion, it's labor shortages, it's conflicts, whether it's trade conflicts or geopolitical conflicts. And what it does is it puts tremendous strain on the supply chains, right? Now, to be able to meet the customer expectations that have been set, we need to react to these disruptions in real time so that we minimize the impact that it has on our customers, right? So the resiliency of operations becomes a key part, right? So these are the three things that we are seeing our customers dealing with.
I think those are great points, Manish. And you know, when I would add that actually, in order to get to these to solve these three things, we need to collect, enrich, and analyze massive amounts of data and data points that live in certain silos, right? Even within one organization, sometimes in fragmented systems. And the idea, in order to actually, as more and more of these solutions move to the cloud, right, we want to help customers to bring sends into this data with one unified layer, which is actually location. And you can imagine that managing location data is already a huge undertaking by itself. So going out and building your own map doesn't really make a lot of sense. So with our capabilities, we can bring actually these transactional data sources together and unify them on location, and then help to make enhanced visibility, help with workflow decision making, collaboration across different parties, and through that actually increase massively your responsiveness or the responsiveness of your business, right? And that is kind of the way to then coming back to your first point, right, to meet these customer expectations or hopefully exceed them in the long run.
Great. Manish, I know that Christoph mentioned siloed data. How does increased visibility into your data and into location services help companies overcome these challenges?
So I think getting visibility is a good starting point, right? It's a requirement. Because what happens is when you are able to get visibility in real time, you can actually get a sense of any deviations that are happening from the plan in the execution phase, right? And if you're able to do it fast, you can actually assess the impact of those deviations, right, on your operations, on your customer commitments, and actually put in place actions and plans to mitigate any impact that those deviations may have. Okay, so that's what we really get by getting visibility in real time.
You know, I think in a way, I would like to see visibility also on different levels. Of course, there are global supply chains, and visibility on, you know, let's say event-based tracking has been around for a while. And more of the individual modalities, let's say vessel tracking, once the container has been loaded, is in place and is available from different aggregators. Now, the interesting thing is that in many ways, building that out into a full multimodal journey and understanding very much what's happening, not only while something is on the move, but especially while shipments are in transition from one modality to another. Think about, let's say, a shipping yard, port authority, where you have actually customs as well. And so things might not be moving as fast as you expected. But in the end, even through location, if you go on a micro level and a hyper-local understanding of location, including not only outdoor but also indoor location tracking, you are starting to get much more insight into operations at different yards, at different shipping sites, etc. And from that, then can derive even better ETAs, because of course in today's world, as you have no visibility into some of these areas, you're actually adding buffers to your transportation plan. And those buffers are sometimes eaten up, and then you're already in the red if you eat up those buffers. If you would have an indication that this might happen in the near future, you can already start to embark on an alternative plan. Another thing, of course, where location and visibility on let's say a hyper-local aspect comes in is, for example, in claims management. And if you even employ an IoT tracker device, then claims management becomes a very, very interesting task, because you suddenly not only have information about dwell times not moving, but also you have information about shock and temperature, and you can actually start to really fully understand when certain events across this journey happened. And you can, without any dispute, be very clear at which facility, under which ownership, certain, for example, claim-worthy damages happened, or delays are happening at certain service providers, and then you can actually start to adjust your transportation plan for the next trip, or you can actually initiate your claims management. So from that perspective, I want to make sure that we understand that location is not only relevant on a global basis, mapping the entire multimodal journey, but it becomes even more relevant when it comes to looking at individual sites and especially intermodal hubs moving shipments from one mode of transportation to the other one.
Great. Are you seeing challenges differing by industry? And if so, what are those challenges that you're seeing and what's preventing organizations from shifting to more predictive supply chain solutions?
Yeah, let me start there, Nick. Maybe clearly, I mean, we all know that e-commerce retail has been driving a lot of these, let's say, customer requirements that Manish was talking about. But they have also been solving some of these problems either by verticalizing their entire supply chain and taking more control, or putting demand on their service providers, their logistics service providers, their forwarders, to actually provide levels of visibility. And so we see clearly retail is driving this. Now with ship shortages and let's say supply chain disruptions in front of global ports, and driver shortages on the road, and let's say misplanned container capacity because of those disruptions, we're seeing that what has been a differentiator from a customer expectation standpoint and customer choice, and coming to ever shorter, let's say, order to delivery cycles, has now become a global need for anybody managing a supply chain, be it for manufacturing purposes, for actually wholesale, for pharma and time critical deliveries. And the practices that we have seen in retail and e-commerce are now becoming more commonly used across the different stakeholders.
And Manish, are you seeing the same thing with customers with respect to the lack of visibility and the challenges that they're facing?
No, I think Christoph had some very important points. I'd like to add just a couple more to that. So one of the challenges to getting good visibility is the ability to get the data in real time, right? And a lot of times organizations are not able to get the right data and harness it because the data sits in siloed areas, right? It sits in organizational data stores, which are really basically legacy architecture, right? They don't support the open architecture, which can enable some of the workflows that Christoph talked about earlier, right? That which are basically can be sort of weaved through through microservices and APIs, right? It makes it very difficult for bringing this data together, to correlate it, to contextualize it, so that you can actually basically draw insights from it.
So that's a great question for you, Christoph or Manish. Is achieving a visibility enough, or is there more that needs to be done?
I think it's a starting point, right? Basically, I think the goal of visibility is to get the information, but basically the power that basically is needed is to actually make good use of that visibility, right? So how do you become more responsive using that visibility? And that comes by correlating that data that you get from visibility across the different points of basically the supply chain, right? And using that, and I'll give you an example, right? So if Christoph talked about that you can get real-time visibility into where your location is, right, for that particular container. But if you don't know what's inside that container, right, you don't really have a good understanding of what the impact of a delayed shipment would be, right, if that particular shipment doesn't come in time. So I think that it's important that we correlate that, and not just that, basically we also use the power of historical data with the new capabilities for prediction, using basically capabilities like artificial intelligence, right? So that you can actually predict what the impact is going to be, and then optimize the outcomes, right? So that you can quickly tailor your reactions to that in real time.
Yeah, great point. And I want to maybe come back to something I mentioned earlier, when visibility indeed is potentially a dot on the map for that container. Manish is talking about you need to link it to what's actually inside that container. And obviously that is super important to make any further decisions. But the point is, one, you want to not only understand where it is now or where it has been, but you also want to know where it will be. And will it be in time where you expected it? And so from that perspective, the visibility itself is only the very first step for additional process control. The next one is really to understand where it should be, and you build out scenarios. Now, suddenly, if you have 10,000 containers in your supply chain continuously on the move in different parts with different service providers, right? And for every container you have let's say hundreds of potential scenarios that would lead to decision making, it's very clear that a single dispatcher or even a team of dispatchers is not able to make those decisions or to evaluate all these scenarios. So what you need is actually you need to employ machine learning capabilities. You need to actually start the systems to provide meaningful business alternatives, and ultimately for a full automation you want a decision to make that you want a system to make that decision based on certain rules and boundaries that you're setting. But in a first step, from visibility to a dispatcher who may or a load planner who will then make a decision, to actually building out these scenario planning capabilities, you need to get to more levels of automation, and you need to start understanding how the machines are behaving, right? And this is actually the journey that I believe we have to go on. And we want to make this kind of capabilities available not only to the largest companies in the world, but also to every actor in the supply chain who can connect to these capabilities.
Great. Christoph, I know that Manish mentioned the role that artificial intelligence plays. Can you tell us how location intelligent AI and ML help predict ETAs in logistics?
Yeah, I think the most obvious ones are basically historic transport-based patterns. So think about how your let's say your truck has been moving from let's say take the example from Houston, one of the big ports, to then maybe Dallas, right? And you understand actually not only how the trucks have been moving on a Monday in the second week of the year, but you actually know that there was a storm, there have been further delays. You actually can bring it down to lane level traffic on the highways. You understand what's happening at the gate of the port. You understand what's happening at the gate of the yard. So suddenly, without having all this detailed information, just from movement information, you can actually derive a lot of potential patterns if you are able to bring this back to location and time. So this would be the basis for advanced network analytics, so which allows you to look for potential alternatives. And if you are able to combine this with logistics operations data, so you have information about loading and unloading, you have actually information about handling dwell times, customs, and other things that add additional delays, you start to actually build much richer patterns, which can only be analyzed through machine learning, right? And that will be the basis for what I would call predictive supply chains and artificial intelligence in supply chain.
Right. So as companies go towards implementing predictive shipment ETAs, for example, can you help us understand the impact that specific metrics and overall supply chain KPIs can be improved by implementing those shipment ETAs?
I mean, in the end, any supply chain is driven by these ETAs. Estimated time of arrival versus the actual time of arrival is probably the first metric for transport, let's say, performance. while of course everything is driven by cost, in the end we know that if you have a just-in-time supply chain for car manufacturing, you know that actually the cost of transportation is much lower than the impact if it would be late and your production line will stop. So from that perspective, it's very, very important that actual time of arrival notifications are not only available to the primary shipper, but especially also to the consignee. But what you want to do is you actually want to, if you're a logistics service provider, you want to make sure that you're not burping out this kind of information in a completely uncommented way. You may want to, as a logistics service provider, stay in control of the options you have to improve that possibility. So I think ETA means something different for different actors in the supply chain, where everybody has some kind of expectations linked to that. And that's why it's so important to actually break down these data silos and enrich and normalize the data for sharing. Let's say, think about middle mile transportations that actually are the feeder towards last mile delivery, home delivery, for example, in e-commerce. ETA is everything, right? To make sure that the last mile delivery van with 150 parcels to deliver on a certain day actually is fully utilized. As we all know, the last mile is the most expensive part of the supply chain. And so if the feeding services around middle mile networks is experiencing hiccups or is actually requiring adjustments due to certain events, then we all know what the impact of ETA actually means.
Manish, can you speak to the actual value in predicting shipment ETA as well? Looks like you may be muted. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, so I know Christoph talked about a lot of from the systems perspective and artificial intelligence. I want to bring a little bit of a human element to this, right? So if actually you are as a service provider, basically provide better ETAs, right? Basically, you are more dependable, you're more predictable in terms of keeping the basically planned time of arrival close to the estimate time of arrival, right? That actually build trust, and people who are able to do that actually can not only sustain the business, but maybe even capture a little bit more of a market share, right? Because you're easier to do business with. It has other hard basic KPIs and metrics that you can achieve. If you have better trust in your shipment times, you really don't need to carry buffer in terms of delivery times which are planned, and actually even safety stocks. If you know that basically this shipment is going to arrive on time X% of the time, then and it does so reliably, you can reduce your safety stock level, which actually frees up cash for you, right? So that's the second area. The third area is actually reducing cost by better scheduling of your basically shipment loading and unloading labor, right? So if you can match that, and if you don't have basically idle times for them, it improves both the productivity and reduces the cost of labor associated with those operations, right? So I think those are some of the additional things on top of what Christoph talked about.
Great, thanks. Christoph, for you then, what role does location play in workflow automation? And can you give some examples?
Yeah, I think when it comes to automation, we're again in this space of seamless handovers. And so on the one hand, you have predictive ETAs. We talked a lot about this, but when it comes to actual times of arrival, what you really want to make sure of in order to enable this kind of automation is to have a very accurate geofencing. So geofencing, which again is not only that a truck has actually arrived in a certain, let's say, radius close to the warehouse or distribution center where that shipment is expected, but that you actually understand it from an isoline routing perspective. So how many minutes is it actually now away, and entering a certain zone of like a 10-minute, including traffic and other capabilities, or a 30-minute time frame will allow you to actually prep the loading dock or prepare for an additional waiting zone assignment on the warehouse yard. And from that perspective, will allow you to actually avoid a traffic jam on your yard, as well as making sure the dock is free and ready to be accepting the next cargo. And so if you have any distribution center automation on the inbound or on the, for the matter, on the outbound logistics, then these kind of real-time location information is becoming super critical, because that's the part that you as the warehouse operator do not control. And so understanding a full or have a full understanding of your fleet that is serving your site is of utmost criticality. And we've seen that actually on the other side, again, in last mile logistics, from our own experience, talking to many customers who are just responsible for rolling out the home delivery, for example, or the last mile delivery. We see that there could be massive distribution center automation, but the delays are happening then on the ramp, loading the vehicles, or availability of drivers, or availability of the right vehicle, or an understanding of, let's say, the right size vehicle for the right tour that has been planned with the right cargo size to matching the capacity of that vehicle is becoming of utmost importance. And if anything is disrupted in this kind of final minutes before loading the last mile van, you can create basically a traffic jam in your own warehouse on the ramp that could disrupt your entire day, right? So in that sense, more and more automation in warehouse and distribution centers requires more visibility on roadside transportation, both inbound and outbound, as well as on the execution of the journey towards the destination. Yeah. And so combining the public road network with the yard operations is, for me, one of the critical enablers for automation of those kind of intermodal journeys.
Great. I'd like to take a moment to also mention that we're getting some great questions from our audience too that we're excited to tackle. Just would encourage anybody who's tuning in right now, if you have any questions for Christoph and Manish, please feel free to enter those in the GoToWebinar chat function. We're excited to get to those. We see them coming in. So Christoph, for you then, I know that sustainability is a big concern today. How does location technology impact the supply chain sustainability practices?
So I think what we are seeing with customers and partners we're talking to, both on the shipper as well as on the logistics service provider carrier side, is that with increased demand by consumers on green choices, as well as increased regulations, as well as now carbon pricing for transportation and logistics, we see that the first RFPs for transportation are issued, which require from the logistics service provider and the carrier actually rather detailed information about the carbon emissions, for example. And not only on, let's say, on a broad global level, but actually down to a transportation level. And starting to understand that end-to-end is becoming a massive task, which we see that a lot of customers are shying away from, or kind of like pushing the topic out. But in the end, in order to create shipment visibility, you enable this kind of data to also be available for sustainability reporting and making decisions on, for example, carbon emission footprint. And that's why I believe we should, as here, and that's what we have decided upon, that we combine everything related to supply chain visibility with sustainability monitoring. And in many cases, it's the same data sources. For example, a telematics signal from a truck cabin, which provides information about the fuel consumption. But if we understand what kind of truck is actually driving the particular load, we can also, based on advanced models, then predict what the CO2 emissions for a certain transport will be. And if there are, let's say, feasible alternatives for this particular transport, go on rail, use a battery electric vehicle, go on hydrogen, or be fine by using the diesel truck because it's actually the most efficient way for this kind of transportation. And again, we're down to business driven decision making, but now with an additional objective, which is, for example, impacted by carbon emissions.
Great. And Manish, can you speak to that as well with the sustainability implications?
No, I think Christoph covered some very detailed points, right? Nick, actually, sustainability is an existing issue of our times, and we as supply chain professionals actually have not only the ability, I think, but the responsibility to actually create that impact, right? So the two sides of it, what Christoph was talking about was that by providing the tools for decision makers, right, to actually measure, have visibility, and the ability to shape that. I think that's a very important part, right? Giving visibility and the data around that enables you to make the right decisions. So that's one part. Second part is basically while it's good to get visibility and report after the fact, but if we can create better plans, right, which actually minimize the movement of these goods, right? Basically, whether by reducing the amount of the time the truck is on the road or the distance it needs to travel, right? So if using the location capabilities, if we can actually cut out even small portions of that, right, through better planning, that has actually a direct impact on the carbon footprint of the operation, right? So it's both about actually making the right plans to reduce the activity, as well as providing the information to basically give visibility, measure, and report, so that we are actually in this continuous loop of trying to improve on what we have been doing.
Great. I do see some good questions coming in from our audience. I see that Rami asked about shipping documents. This is probably for you, Christoph. Can shipping documents be linked to the map, and what is the host source of these documents?
Yeah, so of course, that is the fragmentation that we're talking about, right? And this is only possible through a collaborative effort, because in many cases, shipment documents are still distributed by paper and digitized after the fact, or as the process goes along. So I think what is very, very important in order to get full visibility is to capture data at every step in a digital way and make that available again to all the players. And I think this is where also AWS comes in with some of their capabilities, because there's really technology involved to make that happen in the most easy way. And then we tie it together to the different transports, to the different trucks or modalities that are driving. And basically, it refers to what Manish talked about. You know, we need to understand what's inside that container, not only where it is. And bringing those together is part of this collaborative roadmap that I'm talking about, because there's no silver bullet. We need to work with the players along the supply chain and make sure that the data is being shared.
Great. And for you, Manish, then, what are other top technology supply chain practitioners are investing in?
So I think Christoph touched upon, right? So I think the AI, and there are many elements of AI that come into play. And I'll just talk about a few. So when we talk about digitization of physical documents, for example, right, and how do you actually get real-time information from that, we have capabilities in that space like Amazon Textract, which extract information from a physical document and actually interprets the information basically according to certain templates, right? You have capabilities in the automation from a robotics perspective, right? When it comes to warehouse operations, how do you do that? You have capabilities in the computer vision area. I'll give you an example of an Amazon warehouse in terms of improving the automation, where most of the places you have capabilities for better storing of sort of similar products in a particular area, right? And an associate goes and picks them up. Actually, if you flip that on its head, you use the power of technology to actually have robots bring those bins to you and actually highlight, right, using computer vision, where that particular component, which part of the bin it is in, so that you can shave off seconds in terms of where it is and how you reach out, right, to do that. So this computer vision, there is IoT capabilities from a sensors perspective that Christoph talked about, that you can use to actually enhance the data, not only for the current usage, but basically to learn from later on. You talk about scaling and event-driven capabilities, right? When you have millions of these decisions being made, can you automate them and actually communicate them to the stakeholders in real time, right, through these event-driven architectures? So those are just some of the additional ones that we can basically leverage to provide better workflow automation.
Great insights there. Christoph, for you, I've got a question from Dave. How much has demand increased for your platform since the world has returned to business post-COVID?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting one, because we've seen that when I look at my own customers, basically the ones that have decided on digitization strategies and employ more advanced models and building on capabilities like our platform pre-COVID, have weathered the storms much better. And since now that we've seen COVID and shipment disruptions became the new normal, we've just seen demand exploding. We have so many partners embedding location services into their solutions, as well as the discussions that we're having with shippers and freight forwarders have accelerated tremendously. So I think in the past it was there was a strong focus on, for example, digitization and digitization of documents, but now we're leapfrogging really into the supply chain network optimization, the journey optimization, going from visibility to actually predictive models, and we're doing that at a very fast pace. So I would say the last 2 years have really changed also the perception of many business leaders, and we clearly see the trend of moving from logistics as a pure cost to kind of a customer experience to now something that is not only business critical if it doesn't work, but it becomes a differentiator in a very, very dynamic and versatile world that we're experiencing over the past couple of years. Yes.
Great. You have another question here from Badad. How do you address supply chain management visibility in terms of helping the decision making of both suppliers and buyers?
Yeah, so from a here perspective, we are not embarking on a business model of matching supply and demand. The key here is to provide the right level of visibility for the different function in the supply chain. And obviously, as you can imagine, a shipper has a different interest than a forwarder than a logistics service provider. Just always thinking about let's say, the business model and the value creation, right, that they employ. And so from that perspective, I think it's very, very critical and very important that it's not just one size fits all, but the same data set interpreted with a different angle, you know, provides the right value of that data to the different players. And that is super, super important, I believe, as the world is not only driven by the shippers or by the end consumer. We have to bring these different players together in a collaborative way.
And if I can add to that, right, depending on the industry, whether it's a CPG industry or industrial manufacturer or retail, that the demand supply match has a slightly different connotation, right? So you can actually look at from a demand sensing and demand shaping perspective, right? So if you have a certain amount of inventory available, you can actually differentiate your availability, right? Basically, when can you ship that, right? Can it be done same day? Can it be, will it take 2 days, or will it basically take 4 weeks, right? So I think giving that visibility at the very beginning, right, has a significant impact in terms of your ability to meet that customer demand, right? So that's one. And the other part of that is you can actually start shaping the demand as well, right? So if you have basically availability in a certain area, that you can provide incentive to your consumers to actually see if that is basically a product that they would be interested in, right? So it's both about sensing and shaping depending on what your supply situation is.
Great. I think we've got time for maybe one more question. I do see one from Andrew, who is communicating that in their quest to optimize their networks, there seems to be a little bit difficulty with geocoding in countries with limited availability to public information. So he's asking you, Christoph, if HERE has any capabilities to address addresses in these types of companies or areas, and do you have any other advice if you don't necessarily have the capability?
Yeah, so in general, I think when you look broadly at the industry, location industry, we definitely provide the leading capabilities when it comes to, for example, geocoding in many countries, and we're talking here about more than 200 countries in the world. Of course, there will always be certain areas where, let's say, formalized addresses are not kind of in use or are difficult to obtain. Then the power of the location platform of HERE comes in play, because we can work by providing actually a service and a continuous learning process to enhance the data sets together with a customer or a partner who is operating in a certain geography, who has access to shipment and transportation data, and we can actually derive then and continuously improve the situation and come up with models that would allow you to still identify those locations and address them through advanced routing capabilities or planning capabilities. So I would say a perfect use case for our global location platform.
Awesome. Well, I wish we had time to get to some more questions, but it looks like we're approaching the top of the hour here. Just wanted to take the opportunity on behalf of CSCMP to thank each of you for participating in this great panel discussion. Christoph, Manish, it has been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to following up with those questions we could not necessarily get to during this session, but thanks to each of you.
Thanks so much, Nick.
Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.